Okay. Okay, I think we're live now. So, hello everyone who's tuning in. So this is one of the latest additions to the Clicky webinar series. So 5 steps to a powerful creative campaign. Okay, so introducing your speakers today. So I'm Dan. You probably just saw my face then as well on the live stream. But yeah, so I'm one of the account managers at Clicky within the client services team. So I've been at Clicky for 3 years now, and yeah, I've worked across a number of different campaigns. So we've also got Rhian with us as well.
Yeah, I'm Rhian, so I'm digital design manager at Clicky. I work closely with Dan, and I've been here for about 5 years now. So. Yeah.
Cool.
So today, what we're going to be talking to you about, so just a quick agenda. First of all, we're going to discuss a couple of reasons why you should be considering a creative campaign. And then we're going to run you through 5 simple steps to creating a successful one. So first of all, looking at understanding your problem, the impact, concepting and creative, implementation and execution, and measuring success. And then we're going to have a little bit of time at the end for a bit of a summary and some questions. So first of all, why should you consider a creative campaign? Well, there are a lot of reasons really, but over the last couple of years, we've seen a huge focus being put on the success of a marketing campaign. So making sure that that's driving ROI. We've seen data and insight really drive those campaigns forward. Data in its nature is really measurable and it's metric driven. But alone, it's not going to be enough to create a successful campaign, and that's where the creative side of things kind of comes in. In a world where we're constantly being bombarded with advertising, it's absolutely everywhere now, isn't it?
Yeah.
All over your social media, all over billboards. It's really, really difficult to stand out, and the creativity is what's going to make your brand stand out amongst your competitors and amongst the other noise that's going on in the.
Yeah. So in terms of, the real importance of creative campaigns, ultimately, depending on how you communicate with your audience, is going to influence how they view your brand, your product, and your service offering. And that fundamentally starts with understanding your audience, their likes, dislikes, their pain points. You're going to need really relevant, targeted messaging and creative to really address what you want to achieve out of your campaign. There's a lot of talk, I think, in this day and age around sort of making your ads really relevant and your messaging really relevant as well. But it does take a lot of skill and a lot of time to really get the right sort of placements of wherever your ads are, but then also the right messaging as well. And a really important point I think me and Rhian probably agree on is that it really doesn't matter about your budget size. So if you're a big or a small business, it really doesn't matter. If you're doing like a smaller campaign, you can still be creative with the budget that you've got. And if you're a big business, you might become a bit sort of siloed in how you just churn out the same messaging time and time out again. But you're really going to win big sort of in digital and stand out in a digital crowd if you really differentiate yourself in terms of the creative that you put out there. So in terms of the starting point, so understanding your problem. So you need to be clear about what you want to achieve and really delve into the data that you have access to understand who you're targeting and why. So a really good place to start is, what are you looking to achieve commercially over the next 12 months? It's ultimately what you want to achieve by the end of the campaign, and also you need total clarity and focus on what the commercial goals of your organization is, and you need to align what that campaign should be to that. And then another really important point is to be realistic about your audience. There's a number of people who are quite sort of delusional about their audience and what they think that they're like. So if you're a big size business and you're hitting the same audience over and over again, but you're not seeing sort of a good size of business growth, then you're probably need to go after a different audience. So it's about really understanding, do you really know your audience as best as you could? And then on the other side, there's a sizable sort of project phase that we undertake at Clicky called the discovery and insights phase. So this is where we gather insights to influence a more intelligent digital marketing strategy or campaign. And this stage will ensure that you've considered all the important factors to deliver the most effective future digital strategy possible. It's really about learning who your users are, how they behave online, so that you can more effectively target them. And then to really start asking questions about your audience, you're probably in a, you could be in a small business or a big organization, and you're going to have to try and get people on board and to start thinking about the process of your audience. So
I guess this is like a really good starting point. So if you're not quite ready to jump into your creative campaign, but you want to think about your audience a little bit more and kind of understand who they are, then this is a really good, helpful tool for you, isn't it, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. So empathy mapping is effectively, a great place to start, as Rhian said. And you try and basically work out, who is the person we want to understand? What do they need to do and achieve in their lives through your business? So whether it's a B2B company or a B2C company, that individual has got a job to do and they've got a goal that they want to achieve through your business. You can also ask questions like, what do they see? What other brand messaging are they seeing? What are they seeing in the news, in the media, and other related sort of media that will influence how they might view your brand? What do they say? So what do you kind of envisage your target audience saying, whether that to be to their friends, family, work colleagues? What do they do in their day-to-day lives? That's a fundamental point that a lot of sort of businesses and clients don't tend to look at that much. But if you're in a B2B environment, okay, what are their daily processes? Or if it's B2C, what does their daily sort of journey and touch points look like throughout the day? And also, what do they hear? So what are people telling them? What are people speaking to them about? All these things you can use to kind of build up a starting point, a picture of what that audience might look like. And then going in a little bit more detail to sort of pains and gains. So effectively, if you can work out what your customers' pain points might be through all of those sort of elements that we spoke about above, you can then actually tailor your service and product proposition around those points, so that when you come to do a creative campaign, you can base it around the real pain points that people sort of feel. So a great example, and I always sort of lecture these around the agency, is purple bricks. So obviously a lot of the pain points for their sort of audience was the mad commission fees that people pay when they sell a property. So they've gone into the market and they've absolutely hammered the message home about how they have the sort of cheapest fees, or why do you pay so much in commission? So really, this is a good starting point to get start to really think about that creative process. And then in terms of the impact, so this is, once you've defined your problem, you can now set relevant goals for your creative campaign. So we use a lot of these sort of in Clicky, and a number of clients do use these as well. So they're called SMART targets. So you need to be sort of explicit in the definition of what you want the outcome of this campaign to be. So if you're looking at, say, extending the lifetime value of customers, changing your brand perception from premium to luxury, or you want to try and encourage cross-selling of products, you need to be absolutely explicit to what you want to achieve to offset that problem that you've identified. And then in terms of measuring those, you need multiple KPIs for those targets to really define what success is. But then these KPIs also need to be attainable and then also realistic. There's no point setting massive targets or massive goals if you're never going to hit them. So you need to be really realistic with that. And then also time bound. So depending on your actual outcome that you want to achieve, so say if it is a brand perception piece, you're probably looking at a 1 to 2 year project. But then if you're looking at a shorter promotional campaign, you're probably looking at sort of 1 to 6 months. So it's really important to define to, directors of the companies, senior level staff, and then everyone throughout the company, how long the campaign will be.
Okay, so once we have defined our really big goals, we can then look at taking that into concepting and creative. So from the insights and data we've discovered in the previous steps, we can begin to identify a piece of sharp, compelling insight that really encapsulates a truth about and a problem to solve for our audience. This is really like the starting point for our creative process. Every successful campaign relies on a concept, a big idea with an overarching message for your audience. So no matter how big or small, like Dan was saying, dependent on budget size, no matter how big or small that campaign is, what we're really trying to say is concept creation is now essential in marketing. If your campaign is going to be consistently successful, it really needs that kind of driving force behind it. Yes, we can get ads in the right place, we can get them in front of people, but can we really make them stand out amongst the crowd? And can we really make that creative identify with the audience? And that really is the role of the concept in this case.
Yeah.
So to take that forwards, what we've done is look at a bit of a case study. This is one of my favourite campaigns that's kind of around at the moment, and it's Carlsberg. I think everyone will be quite familiar in the fact that their previous strapline was probably the best beer in the world. So Carlsberg have released this new campaign, and they took a really compelling insight. So over the last year or so, the number of people drinking standard lager, so brands such as Carlsberg, Carlin and Foster's, that's fallen by 1.6 million in the past 5 years. At Carlsberg, they addressed that problem directly. So they were quoted saying, "At Carlsberg, we lost our way. In order to live up to our promise of being probably the best beer in the world, we had to start again. We completely rebrewed Carlsberg from head to hop." So what they've done from there is they've created a goal. So the goal from that was to redefine the perception of the product and the brand, shifting the focus from quantity to quality. So how have they done that in the creative? I suppose in this advert it is super simple, but what they've done is they've used that data and insight to create a message that's the most honest and direct campaign they've kind of ever implemented than ever before. They've taken their previous strapline, probably the best beer in the world, and they've boldly addressed their audience's criticism and concerns and directly engaged with them by a bit of a tongue-in-cheek strapline, probably not the best beer in the world. And they've taken that further, like on social media, they've really addressed people's tweets, people's comments, what they've said about the lager before being absolutely awful, and they've turned that round to really have that honest and direct approach with their customers. And it's gone really viral, it's really blown up, and I think it's been really, really successful.
I think the big thing also to note here is how they've almost humanized the brand a lot more. You know, it's as if, you know, yeah, look, we were probably in the wrong with what we were doing. So admitting your wrongs isn't a bad way to be. So you're connecting with your audience on a different level. I mean, that's what's really special about this one. I
think people really appreciate the kind of honest, and it's really brave to go out there and admit that you were wrong, and people appreciate that, don't they?
Absolutely.
So looking at your campaign, once you've got an overarching campaign message and a bit of a concept, we can then take that and revert it back to the data to create a granular marketing strategy. So how do we implement this concept, and how do we execute those ideas in our campaign? Well, obviously we've talked a lot today about data and insight and the power of that. So it's important that whilst we've got that audience, we need to tailor our messages specifically to those demographics within your audience. Just because you've got an idea of the bigger picture of who your audience are, that can then be broken down into specific audiences within that and different demographics. So it's really important that we drill down into their behaviour online and create a strategy that really reaches your customers in the right place, at the right time, on the right platform and on the right device. At Clicky, we have a lot of people approach us and they say, oh, we want to target our ads on Facebook, or we want to use Instagram, and there's no real driving force behind that. So our job at Clicky is to really identify, you know, where is the right place for these ads and how are we going to get them in front of people. So at this point, we can begin to produce the creative assets for our campaign. There's a vast amount of different advert types and specifications that we could include in our campaign. So things like video. On here we've shown a carousel advertisement that we did for a brand called Freedom, and also plenty of others, carousel ads, experience ads, lots of different ways we could creatively kind of visualize concept and message to our audience. But again, the best way really to make sure that is going to be successful is to refer back to the data. So what we've done is we've looked a little bit at some considerations for specifically the creative that you're going to produce. So first of all, what we want to do is make sure that we're creating thumb-stopping content. We only have a matter of seconds to engage with our audience, and users are becoming more and more familiar to scrolling. It takes something really special to stop them in their tracks. With a limited space and what's achievable within advertising constraints, we have some simple steps that we've identified for creating this kind of thumb-stopping experience. So first of all, it's really important to look at your advert in context. For example, if you're promoting your business on Facebook, consider the context of the user scrolling through the newsfeed. Facebook, as an example, as you can see here, it's quite a light newsfeed. It's quite white, not specifically many colours there. What we want to do is create some really bold imagery, really bright colours, like in this Freedom advert, to really capture that user's attention as they're scrolling through. You know, people aren't sitting on social media reading every word. They're skimming through and trying to capture something, trying to find something that sparks their attention. And we think this did this really well.
And I think looking at obviously the ad that's an example on the slides, we could have very easily just crammed in that image into a single image ad, but you've also just got to make sure that you get creative with the ad. The ad placements themselves, especially on Facebook and Instagram. There's an absolute plethora of different ad types now, and this ad, performed incredibly well, and really started generating some conversation amongst the audience. So it just shows you little sparks creativity like this can do really well.
Yeah. So also it's important to use effective and impactful imagery that your audiences can identify with. So people are getting more and more aware of stock imagery. You can get better stock imagery than previously, than looking at the stereotypical stock you can get. Now it has improved a lot more. But the more relevant your imagery is to your audience, the more likely it is that they can visualize themselves either engaging with the products that you're trying to sell, picturing themselves in a similar scenario, or triggering an emotional response from your audience. That's really the best way you're going to engage with them, is if you can create content that is relevant to them. And finally, considering your branding. So what messages are you communicating, and is that consistent with the rest of your brand? There's no point in creating a really standout creative advertisement if that's completely a million miles away from what you're doing with the rest of your brand. You might get that standout reaction, but people aren't going to recognize that that's you. And the way to do that is really to refer back to your brand guidelines, making sure things like the colors you're using, the typography you're using, and the language you're using are all in line with what's been set out there. So Dan's going to talk to you a little bit about the importance of refreshing creative regularly as well.
Yeah, so from a number of sort of campaigns that we've done previously, refreshing creative is really important, but it's also important not to completely overhaul the creative so that it doesn't lose its message. So a big insight that we get from sort of Facebook and Instagram ads for a number of our clients is that you want your ads to be high frequency, so you're hitting that audience with the same message, so it really sort of embeds in their minds, and your brand is always front of mind. So when we talk about refreshing creative, it's more along the lines of subtle changes rather than complete overhaul of the ad itself. So that's something that we've sort of learned over the past couple of years.
So it's also important as well to think about your bigger picture. And once you're in front of your audience, well done, you've got their attention. What happens next? So thinking about the journey from seeing your ad all the way through to conversion, because ultimately that is what we want them to do. We want them to convert. So keeping your goals in mind all the way through that process. A lot of the time, there's going to be lots of different touch points along the way. Ideally, people come to your website, they will find out a little bit more. They might fill in a form, they'll convert, and they'll leave. And that would be the absolute ideal scenario, but things aren't a perfect world, and people are likely to revisit revisit lots of different touch points along the way, which might consist of an advert, it might consist of an email campaign, but we can't control kind of the journey that they will take. So what we need to do is think about where we're sending people once we've got them in front of that ad. So they've clicked their ad, where are they taken? Are they taken to a landing page which drives a strong call to action? Have we given the user enough information to make an informed decision? So once we've got their attention, once we've got them through to that landing page, have we considered our USPs? What's really gonna drive them further then to convert and kind of fill in that form or buy that product? We need to give them all that information in that next step, really.
And that sort of comes into a good lead or a highly qualified lead. So it's at that point there that, you know, you can get as many leads in as you want, but if they're not of a good quality and they're not generating money for you, you know, once they do come through, then that's where you have to tweak that information to make sure they're informed enough for you to be able to convert them on your side as well. Okay, so probably the most important step really of this process is measuring success. So say if you've done your creative campaign, you've understood your problem, you're 6 months down into the campaign and you really don't know sort of what you're doing in terms of tracking or anything like that, or reporting, then you're gonna have a bad time. So there's a couple of things that we always try and focus on, and just some general tips really to help you understand how you should be measuring your creative campaign. So fundamental point, report on KPIs linked to smart targets. So where you've got your smart targets, you can have multiple KPIs beneath those targets to gauge success. So you could have percentage gains on those KPIs, or potentially percentage increases and decreases and things like that, to really measure the impact of those smart targets. And then you've got to refer back to that explicit outcome that you wanted to achieve. If you've sold the campaign into, managing directors, senior levels, senior team members, they're really going to be looking for, okay, did you achieve what we said we were going to achieve? So you need to make sure that explicit outcome, you can use data and the stats generated from the campaign to prove that. And in terms of the impact on overall ROI, it's so easy in this day and age to really work out what your overall return on investment is. We do it for pretty much every industry that we work in, especially sort of travel and tourism and the legal sector. That's a really good one to work at ROI. There's actually a blog on our Clicky website that our strategy and insights manager David Berry actually put together on working out ROI, so you can find that on our website. But ultimately, working out the ROI on how much you invested and how much you got out, that's going to be a fundamental thing you need to look at. And once you've measured the commercial success through ROI, through monetary terms, it's also about measuring the creative success. So understanding how your ads were engaged with by your audience, how many conversions specific ads got, and then also using split testing to work out what best messaging worked, and then for future campaigns and even to influence your whole sort of brand strategy, you can work out what the most important messages is for your company.
I think what we get a lot of the time as well is that creative can be quite subjective, and by implementing things like split testing, we can actually measure our success a little bit more. So looking at which messages are performing better, which imagery might be performing better, and then that really influences then how you take that campaign forward to make sure that you're building on that success every single time that you are creating a creative campaign. Yeah,
and then I think a lot of the time as well, lots of sort of team members might not believe in creative sort of approaches. It's very easy to just churn out the same messaging year on year. But if you do something different in terms of creative, it's really important to emphasize how important that's been to the overall campaign success, because you could do a bog standard campaign that'll maybe do okay, but then if you get really creative and you suddenly see results double overnight, then it's really important to highlight that to the rest of the company so that they understand what's been done.
I think having that data as well that you get in the beginning of a campaign, it allows you to kind of find that insight that you might not have found before. And by doing that, you can give creative the opportunity to take a few risks with your campaign. potentially take it in a direction that you wouldn't have before, because you have got that data to back it up. So by pairing data with creativity, it takes that subjectivity out of it a little bit, and it allows us to really push creative as something that's going to drive your campaign forward.
Absolutely. And then another important point is reflection and analysis of the optimization work that was carried out. So depending on your timeline, on how long that is, you're obviously going to look at your ad copy, your landing pages, all your split testing and things like that. It's good to reflect on what was done to understand what improved the campaigns, what didn't, just so you can be sure that when you do ones in the future, that you've got those learnings again. And I think that, most importantly, it's be open and be agile in your response to change. It's good to embrace data with the campaigns, and more importantly, just be agile in making those changes and making any amends to landing pages, things like this, when the data shows it. Don't just do it on a whim.
Okay, so to recap, first of all, we looked at understanding your problem. So really understanding your audience, using things like discovery and insights to really understand your users, how they behave online, and what they would expect from your campaign. Number two, the impact. So setting those smart, measurable goals, linking them to KPIs, linking them to ROI. Everything's got to have a business case. We want it to be measurable and driven by the commercial objectives of your company. Number three, concepting and creative. So making sure that your creative campaign really has that big idea. It has that concept to really drive it further, and has a consistent message that you can roll out across every single touch point. Number four, looking at implementation and execution. So really, how are we going to take those messages and roll them out across different platforms and different ad specifications. And number five, finally, probably the most important, as Dan said, looking at measuring the success of the campaign. There's no point in creating a really, really amazing campaign if we're not going to look at the results that it's achieved. And it's ultimately what is going to create success off the back of that. You want to be refining it every time so that you're building a more successful campaign every single time.
Okay, so thank you for listening. Are there any questions come through?
Yeah, so we've got a couple. So looking at the first stage of understanding your problem, what would you say are the key tools you'd recommend using to get to understand your audience if you were a small business?
Yeah, I think the natural sort of first step is to look at Google Analytics data. If you've got that set up on your website, that you can really derive a lot of insights from that if you do know how to use the platform quite well. If you've got sort of a Facebook page set up, you can gather a lot of qualitative sort of insights about your audience as well, even through everything through like social listening tools, like looking at comments, and understand how certain audience might engage, with Facebook. Other sort of platforms that you can use. We've recently just started using sort of Hitwise with some of our clients. So that's a good place to start as well if you can get access to that data.
Cool. Another one. So how would the 5 steps change depending on whether the business is perhaps a B2C or B2B?
Yeah, so I think realistically that they probably stay the same. They would stay the same. It's just obviously each and every area, you just have to tailor it more towards your audience. B2B and B2C audiences are completely different. People work in a completely different sort of frame of mind within B2B. So
it's most importantly really just to be considering your audience, and that comes in the first step really, in the understanding your problem. Once you've got that, the way that we would then look to structure the 5 steps would be quite similar. So we would always still advise that you do have that big concept and you do have that creative that's going to drive the campaign further. It's all about measuring that success at the end really, isn't it, and making sure that you're targeting the right audience. So really, I think the top level way we would approach it would be quite similar.
Yeah.
That's them all.
Brilliant. Okay. Thanks everyone.
Okay, well, thanks for
listening.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next webinar.
Yeah, next month.